So you don't know if you're going to be naming, putting another nomination forward. Okay, Mr. President, you've got a big meeting.
It's possible. You know, in theory, it's 2 or 3, they tell me. If you just read statistics, it could be 2, could be 3, could be 1. I don't know. I'm prepared to do it, but when you mention Alito, he is a great justice.
There you have President Trump speaking about the possibility of appointing another Supreme Court justice. We heard that Justice Alito made a stop by Walter Reed. They acted like it was no big deal. He never lost consciousness or anything like that. But what would happen if President Trump had the opportunity to influence yet again the Supreme Court? Let's talk to our friend Hans von Spakovsky with us once again, Advancing American Freedom, senior legal fellow, former FEC Commissioner and DOJ lawyer. Hans, welcome back. It's good to have you back with us.
Well, thanks for having me back. Alito, has been on the court now for 20 years, although that makes him very junior compared to Clarence Thomas, who's been on there for more than 30 years.
Talk to me a little bit, Hans, about, we usually discuss the Supreme Court justices based on rulings that they're having and, opinions that they're giving. But what is it like to be on the Supreme Court? Of course, it's a lifetime appointment, but what kind of influence does it have if you're the Chief Justice, a Senior Justice, a Junior Justice? How does that all work?
Well, you don't have a lot of power, I guess, administratively, if you're just one of the justices. I mean, the Chief Justice's main thing that he does is he assigns who's going to write opinions in specific cases. I mean, that's really the big thing that the Chief Justice can do. But otherwise, look, your influence depends on who you are and what kind of opinions you write. Clarence Thomas, for example, boy, he's had a lot of influence on the court because of the, frankly, terrific opinions he's written, which are in-depth, correct historically. They're very intellectual. They're well-researched, well-written, and he's had a lot of influence on the court because of that. Of course, Alito has too. Alito particularly has been very good on voting and election issues. And remember, they have 3 cases that we're waiting for, big election cases, right now that are pending before the Supreme Court.
So let's talk a little bit about how the Supreme Court this year, those rulings usually come down by the end of June. I'm wondering if you expect any of them before that. Talk to us a little bit about how big of an influence the Supreme Court could have on our election system this year.
Well, like I said, they have 3 very big decisions that we're waiting for. And, today's Thursday, tomorrow is Friday. And tomorrow is actually a scheduled decision release day. So start at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Everybody's going to be watching to see what opinions they've released. You can't predict, but I would hope that they would actually release at least one, hopefully 2 of those election decisions, because the elections are encroaching on us really quickly. Primaries are starting to come up. And we need to know what they're going to do. Of those 3 opinions, one is about the states that allow absentee ballots to come in and be counted after Election Day.
Illinois. That's coming out of Illinois, correct?
Right. Illinois, in fact, has the longest period of time, 2 weeks, that they allow that. This is a case out of Mississippi. Mississippi has a 5-day period. There's a second case out of Louisiana that involves redistricting, which, as you know, has been a big fight across the country. And the issue there is basically when, if ever, can race be used to draw the lines of legislative districts. And then the third one, which involves the Federal Election Commission and campaign finance laws, is all about how much money can political parties spend to support their candidates in coordination with their candidates. And that could have a big effect on where campaign funds are spent in these upcoming midterm elections.
So these are very huge decisions.
Right.
Do you have we've got like a 6-3 breakup between more constitutionalist judges, I'm saying that as opposed to conservative, and the 3 more liberal judges.
Right.
Are there any, nothing's ever obvious with the Supreme Court, but tell me how you anticipate potentially, if any of these, going one way or the other.
I think there's a good shot, I'd put it at 60-40, that they're going to say that allowing ballots to come in and be counted after Election Day actually violates the federal laws that set the day for the federal election. When it comes to the redistricting case, I think what they're going to do is issue new guidelines, much stricter, that really limit the use of race only to actual proven circumstances where there was intentional racial discrimination, which is not the situation now. The coordinated spending one, I would hope they would go with the First Amendment, which is to throw out the current limitations. Because, Annie, look, what is the purpose of political parties? They're organized to find and support their candidates. So to me, putting a limit on how much they can spend on their own candidates just doesn't make a lot of sense, particularly under the First Amendment. Will they do that? That one I can't predict.
We're speaking with Hans von Spakovsky, Advancing American Freedom Senior Legal Fellow and former FEC Commissioner and former DOJ lawyer. I want to ask you about the Attorney General position right now. Todd Blanche in as acting Attorney General, Pam Bondi out. Do you have any thoughts on where the president might want to go next with his nomination, maybe giving Todd Blanche the actual position of Attorney General and not acting, or if you think he might go another direction or should?
Well, he's probably happy with the things that Todd Blanche has been doing. The one thing I would look, you know, Donald Trump is hard to predict.
Yes. Yes.
The one thing I would say, and I think I've said this before, is I think he's going to pick someone who is currently inside the Justice Department. And the reason for that is that if he picks an outsider, it'll be a while before they can be Attorney General, because they can't even get confirmed before the FBI does a background investigation, which takes time. Whereas the current people who work there, like Todd Blanche, that's already been done. So if the president wanted him in, he could nominate him immediately, send his nomination up to the Senate, and they could act within, a couple of weeks to get him confirmed. That's not true with outsiders. I've heard people speculating about, former state AGs and U.S. senators and stuff, none of whom have had that kind of investigation. I think you want somebody in there in a hurry.
Is it easier to because obviously the Senate would have to confirm, we here in the state of Missouri love Eric Schmidt. He was the attorney general here. Josh Hawley, the other senator from here, also the attorney general of Missouri. But if you were to appoint someone like that, like Mark Wayne Mullen was for the DHS position, maybe they have a better chance of getting through the nomination process or not. Does that factor in?
Yeah, it does. But I think if you talk to U.S. senators who've been nominated for positions, you would have them shaking their heads at the way that people they were friendly with in the Senate suddenly said, we're not going to support you, we're against you. So the fact that you've been in the U.S. Senate, it might give you a little bit of an edge. But if you're a conservative, for example, Democrats are probably going to uniformly come out against you, and they're not going to allow the Senate kind of courtesy you're supposed to give colleagues to prevent them from doing that.
Last question before we let you go, Hans. When somebody is being confirmed in the Senate, if it's a senator that's being confirmed, for instance, Mark Wayne Mullen, when he was put up to be Kristi Noem's replacement at DHS, right, does he have the opportunity to vote for himself? Is he required to abstain?
I don't think he's required to abstain, but I think that's what folks do just because it doesn't look right if they don't do that.
All right. Well, Hans von Spakovsky, thank you for visiting with us. I hope you're having a lovely spring afternoon. You're in D.C., aren't you?
I am, and the weather this week here has been absolutely gorgeous.
You got some cherry blossoms still out?
There have been a few. They're mostly gone, and it is getting very warm here, too.
Well, I know I was surprised when I went to visit D.C. a few years ago that D.C. is basically due east of St. Louis. So I think we have pretty similar weather patterns. You guys are just a few days after us. Hans, thank you for being with us today. We'll have you back soon.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye. We're going to take a break. When we come back, my friend Stewart's American Mortgage, is going to be with us, and we're going to discuss some of the ever-changing elements of the mortgage industry and purchasing in a time right now with spring coming in to full bloom. Of course, the real estate market, it goes crazy. How do you position yourself best in this market with the ever-changing news coming out of Washington, D.C., policy changes? We'll talk with Stewie next. If you've got a question that you'd like us to ask,